people who are like not really interested in cinema, who are not cinephiles, probably won't be able to name at least 5 women directors, and this shows how women are just erased from the history of cinema. Hi everyone, my name is Tanya. If you follow me on Instagram, you've already seen that I started talking about women's representation in our culture and women's place in our culture, and I even decided that I will be sharing the work of women in arts, and now I want to explain why I've decided to do it and why it became important for me. The things that I will say, they may be obvious to some of you, but at the same time they may be not at all obvious to other people who haven't come to this realization yet, and so I think it's important to kind of explain my point here. Little disclaimer, everything that I want to talk about with like love and positivity. Obviously I don't hate men, I don't blame men who create art, and I don't tell you to like stop watching men directed movies, but let me explain my point and tell you why it's important to bring spotlight on women in arts and just appreciate their work more. So obviously it's not a secret to anyone that women historically were excluded from many types of jobs and just many areas of like our life. But why am I talking necessarily about the culture, and why am I saying that even up to this day women are being underrepresented and excluded from our culture? The first reason is kind of simple. It's just because culture is a huge and a very important part of my life, and it's just important for me personally. But second of all, I think that generally in the world we see a lot of improvements and we see more women in different kind of jobs. But the problem with culture is that culture is hugely based on classics and on masterpieces that everyone should watch, everyone should read, and this is what shapes our minds, this is what forms us as people, as humans. And when we talk about those classics and those masterpieces that are the most important things in like our cultures, they are mostly created by men, and the problem here is even if we see more women writers, more women directors nowadays, the huge part of the culture, which is like the classics, is still the creation of men. So this is why I think that culture is a huge and important part of our life that women are still hugely underrepresented in. I hope that that was clear. Next, I want to talk about my personal experience, how I came to that realization and why it's important. In different periods of my life, I was more interested in literature, then I was more interested in art, and during the past couple of months I became really interested and more invested in cinema. At some point I just looked back at all of the movies, at the huge amount of movies that I watched during those months. I realized that 90% or even more, like 95% of those movies were created by men. What I felt was a kind of a shock and a bit of like disappointment and sadness, and I just felt kind of excluded from that world. But I kind of let it go. I just continued watching those movies because I didn't really know what to do with that. But in February, so it was just like 1 month ago, I watched 2 movies considered as masterpieces in our culture, considered like one of the best movies ever made. Those movies were Taxi Driver and Fight Club. So first I watched Taxi Driver, and I knew that it is an important movie in cinema's history, but I didn't like it. And I have several issues with that movie, and it's a subject for a whole other video. Just hear me out here. I could understand why people say it's important, but I didn't like it. And then I wrote on my letterboxd, I didn't necessarily say that I didn't like it, but I gave it 3 stars out of 5 just as my subjective rating. And then I received like a wave of kind of hatred from men who love this movie. You just didn't understand it. You can't understand it because you're a girl. You just don't get it. It's like very deep. You're not supposed to like the character. He's like an anti-hero. It's like the whole point that you're not supposed to like him, etc, etc, etc. And at this point, I've realized something even deeper than my first realization. Not only movies are made by men and about men, but they are also made for men. Because who are the people who say that this movie is a masterpiece? Who are the people who write the cinematographic history? Who are the people who decide which movie is good and which movie is bad? These people are also mostly men. So cinema's industry is not only created by men, but it is also controlled by men, because men, they control not only who make the movies and what they make the movies about, but also what you're supposed to think about these movies. I'm not saying that Taxi Driver is like a bad movie or something like this. That's not the point. But the point here is that I was criticized by men just because my vision of this movie was different from theirs. And so not only I'm supposed to watch movies that are created by men, but I'm also supposed to feel certain way about these movies. Actually, at first, I also started questioning my vision of this movie. I started thinking, well, if everyone is saying to me that I'm supposed to love it, why don't I love it? Maybe the problem is within me. So you see, here's the thing. You became influenced by this major opinion of men. You have the fear of being excluded from the community. You have the fear of people saying like that you're not skilled enough, you're not experienced enough, you just don't understand it, basically you just don't get it. When you're a girl, you are always being tested, your knowledge is being questioned. Are you eligible enough? Are you knowledgeable enough to like this? And as a girl, you're supposed to know everything in order to not be excluded from that men community or men's fandom, etc.
Are you serious? You've never seen Fight Club?
And apart from being excluded from the community, it also creates this stereotype of women's movies, that like movies that generally women enjoy, and these movies are being regarded as less important, as less deep and stuff, and it creates this stereotype that women can't understand real movies and women only enjoy romantic movies and, I don't know, teenage movies and stuff like that.
Girls like that stuff.
So that was my second realization of like this community being highly controlled by men. And the third realization that I came to is that the problem with these movies, with Taxi Driver and Fight Club, for me the problem was not in the movie itself, in how it is made, etc., but in the fact that these movies are being viewed as universal masterpieces that show the universal experience of humanity. They depict the humanity in general. They talk about humans' feelings, about being lonely, about having like anxiety or depression.
For 6 months, I couldn't sleep.
About our society. Fight Club is also about the toxic masculinity and stuff. And my problem with that was that all those masterpieces, like mostly all of those masterpieces that depict humanity, they don't really depict humanity in my opinion, because they depict men.
What makes a man?
And yes, I know that Fight Club is supposed to be a satire on masculinity, but still you can't argue that it's still the experience of masculinity and the experience of being a male, even if it's a satire on that experience.
Still men.
And once again, I want to clarify that obviously I don't want to say that this experience is bad or not valid. This movie absolutely has a right to be and to be praised, but I'm just sad that there are no other movies about a female experience that would receive the same praise and the same recognition.
Man is what we are.
I think that almost every woman would feel this disbalance with these movies, and because of that she won't be able to love these movies in the same way that men love them. We can't really relate to them, which is also very important. So after watching Fight Club, this is the realization that I came to, and I tweeted, I'm tired of stories that show men as the representation of humanity. I'm tired of stories about women created by men. We have our own voice, just let us speak. So here's the thing. Most movies and most books that are considered masterpieces, normally they show men as the representation of humanity. So the experience of a man equals the experience of a human. And even when there are women characters, or even if there are like main characters women, it's not a completely truthful representation, just because a man can't really write about women in the same way as a woman would write about a woman. Sometimes men just use the image of women not to show the real experience of women, but to show their experience as men, but in a more feminine way. Basically, these stories are about men in the body of women, and so that's why I think and I say that it's important to let women talk about their experience. It's important that a person who experienced it tells about their experience.
Women, they have minds and they have souls as well as just hearts, and they've got ambition and they've got talent as well as just beauty.
I kind of explained you how I realized all that. And then I decided to talk about it on my Instagram. I decided to share the work of women that we usually forget about. People say that I come off angry when I talk about that.
You're angry at the world.
Obviously, yes, I'm just a little bit angry, I'm a little bit sad, because I just don't see myself in these stories. I don't see women represented. It was really hard for me to come back to enjoying cinema, because every time I'd decide to watch a movie, I'll have that thought at the back of my mind that again it's a movie created by men, stories about men. After that, I decided to watch more women-directed films and read about this topic, and right now I'm talking to you about all this, and I want to end it at a very positive note. I think I kind of found that balance of not just ignoring the problem and of not just being angry about the problem. I think I came to the good balance of watching those masterpieces that are created by men and watching women directors, and now I've just decided that I will discover more women in art. I will try to share it with you on my media platforms, and I am really happy about that. If you watched this video till the end, I think you kind of understood why it's important. Thank you so much for watching. You can leave your opinion in the comments. Yeah, thank you so much. Bye.